Thomas Harrington was a man who had everything: money, power, and influence. Yet, as he sat alone in the dimly lit corner of an upscale restaurant, there was an emptiness in his eyes that no amount of wealth could fill. His tailored suit, expensive watch, and perfectly styled hair screamed success. But beneath the polished exterior lay a man burdened by guilt and regret. The world saw him as a self-made billionaire who clawed his way to the top. But tonight, all he felt was the weight of his failures. The restaurant buzzed with laughter and chatter, couples enjoying their meals, families sharing stories. Thomas, however, was different. He rarely dined out anymore, especially not like this. Tonight, though, he made an exception. For Emily. Emily was his 8-year-old daughter, a bright-eyed little girl with a smile that could light up even the darkest room. But life hadn't been kind to her. Born with cerebral palsy, she faced challenges most people couldn't imagine. And while Thomas loved her deeply, he knew he hadn't been the father she deserved. A bitter divorce 6 months ago left him as Emily's primary caregiver. Her mother, once a constant presence in her life, had moved on, leaving Thomas to navigate the complexities of raising a child with special needs. It wasn't easy. Between board meetings, business deals, and late-night calls, finding time for Emily often took a backseat. He tried. He really did. But the demands of his empire always seemed to pull him away. Tonight, though, he wanted to change that. Even if just for one evening, he wanted to show Emily that she mattered more than anything else. As he waited for her to arrive, Thomas fidgeted with the napkin on his lap. He glanced at his phone, checking the time. Emily was running late, held up by her physical therapist. He sighed, feeling a pang of frustration mixed with guilt. Why couldn't he manage his schedule better? Why did it always feel like he was failing her? Finally, the hostess led Emily to their table. She wore her favorite pink dress, her curly hair tied into a neat ponytail. Her small hands gripped the handles of her walker as she slowly made her way toward him. Thomas stood up, forcing a smile. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly, pulling out her chair. "You look beautiful." Emily beamed, her cheeks turning red. "Thanks, Daddy." For a moment, Thomas forgot about his worries. Watching her face light up reminded him why he worked so hard in the first place, to give her the best life possible. But deep down, he wondered, was it enough? Could money ever replace the time they'd lost? As they opened their menus, Thomas noticed something: a young waitress approaching their table. She looked tired, her uniform slightly wrinkled, but there was warmth in her smile. Little did Thomas know, this woman would soon remind him of what truly mattered in life. The waitress approached their table with a polite smile, her notepad in hand. Her name tag read Sarah, and though she looked exhausted, there was a kindness in her eyes that immediately put Emily at ease. "Hi there," Sarah said warmly, glancing between Thomas and Emily. "What can I get for you two tonight?" Thomas quickly scanned the menu, his mind already made up. He ordered a steak for himself and a simple pasta dish for Emily, knowing it was one of her favorites. As Sarah jotted down their orders, she noticed Emily struggling to open the wrapper of a breadstick. The little girl's fingers fumbled with the thin paper, her face crunching in frustration. Without hesitation, Sarah knelt beside Emily. "Let me help you with that, okay?" she said gently, her voice soft and reassuring. She carefully unwrapped the breadstick and handed it to Emily, who gave her a shy but grateful smile. Thomas watched silently from across the table, his brow furrowing. He wasn't used to seeing someone step in so naturally, especially not a stranger. When their food arrived, Sarah returned to check on them. That's when she noticed Emily having trouble using her fork. The noodles kept slipping off, and Emily's attempts grew increasingly frustrated. Thomas reached out to help, but before he could, Sarah stepped in again. "Mind if I give it a try?" she asked, looking at Thomas for permission. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Sarah pulled up a chair and sat beside Emily. With patient hands, she guided the fork into the pasta, making sure it stayed steady before handing it to Emily. "You've got this," Sarah encouraged, her tone full of warmth. Emily giggled as she successfully took a bite, her earlier frustration melting away. Thomas couldn't take his eyes off the scene unfolding before him. It wasn't just the act itself that struck him. It was the way Sarah did it. There was no pity in her actions, no awkwardness or discomfort. Instead, she treated Emily with genuine care, as if helping her was the most natural thing in the world. For the first time in years, Thomas felt a pang of envy, not because he wanted attention for himself, but because he wished he could be that effortless, that instinctively kind. As Sarah finished helping Emily eat a few more bites, she stood up and smiled at them both. "Let me know if you need anything else," she said before heading back to the kitchen. Emily grinned after her, clearly fond of the waitress who had made her feel so comfortable. Thomas, however, remained quiet, lost in thought. He had hired nannies and caregivers over the years, people who were paid generously to look after Emily. But none of them had ever shown the same level of compassion Sarah had in those few minutes. It wasn't about money or obligation for her. It was something deeper, something innate. And as Thomas watched his daughter happily munching on her pasta, he realized how much he had missed by not being present in moments like these. For the rest of the meal, Thomas found himself stealing glances at Sarah whenever she passed by their table. Who was she? How could someone with such a demanding job still have the energy to care so deeply? He didn't know the answers yet, but one thing was certain. Sarah's simple act of kindness had left an indelible mark on him and on Emily. Little did Thomas know, this chance encounter would soon change his life. And Sarah's, in ways neither of them could have imagined. As the evening wore on, Thomas found himself unable to shake the image of Sarah kneeling beside Emily. It wasn't just her actions that lingered in his mind. It was the way she carried herself, the quiet confidence and warmth she exuded without expecting anything in return. He had spent years accumulating wealth, building an empire, and surrounding himself with people who either feared or admired him. Yet here was someone who didn't know him, didn't care about his money or status, and still managed to touch his life in a profound way. Emily, meanwhile, seemed happier than she'd been in weeks. After Sarah helped her with the pasta, she chattered excitedly about everything. The food, the restaurant's decorations, even the soft music playing in the background. Her laughter filled the air. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Thomas saw glimpses of the joyful little girl he remembered from before the divorce. But as much as he wanted to take credit for this moment, he knew it wasn't his doing. It was Sarah's kindness that had brought this light back into Emily's eyes. Thomas leaned back in his chair, watching as Sarah moved gracefully between tables, attending to other customers with the same level of care. She didn't seem rushed or bothered by the demands of her job, even though it was clear she'd been working hard all night. There was something almost magnetic about her, a sense of calm and authenticity that drew people in. He wondered how she stayed so grounded, especially in a world where everyone seemed obsessed with climbing higher, earning more, and chasing success at any cost. For Thomas, success had always come with a price. His relentless pursuit of wealth had earned him respect in boardrooms and admiration from strangers, but it had also cost him relationships with his ex-wife, with friends he once cherished, and most painfully, with Emily. He thought about all the times he promised to be there, for her only to cancel last minute because of work. All the missed birthdays, school events, and bedtime stories. Money could buy comfort, security, and convenience, but it couldn't buy back the moments he lost. A wave of shame washed over him as he realized how distant he'd become, not just as a father, but as a human being. When was the last time he'd done something truly selfless? Something that didn't benefit him directly or advance his career? He couldn't remember. And yet here was Sarah, a complete stranger, giving her time and energy to help someone else's child without hesitation. When Sarah returned to check on them one last time, Thomas thanked her again, this time more sincerely. "You didn't have to do that," he said, his voice softer than usual. "But I'm glad you did." Sarah shrugged, brushing off his gratitude with a small smile. It's no big deal. Kids deserve to feel happy when they're eating dinner, don't they? Her words hit Thomas like a punch to the gut. They were simple, straightforward, and undeniably true. Kids did deserve happiness, and not just the kind that came from toys or vacations or expensive gifts. They deserved love, attention, and patience. Things Thomas had failed to give Emily far too often. As Sarah walked away, Thomas sat quietly, staring at his half-empty plate. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel vulnerable, to admit that he wasn't perfect, that he couldn't do everything on his own. Maybe that was okay. Maybe it was even necessary. Because if tonight had taught him anything, it was that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could leave the biggest impact. And maybe, just maybe, Sarah was exactly the person he needed to show him how to be the father Emily deserved. It was a crisp autumn evening when Thomas called everyone together for what he described as a small celebration. The Harrington estate was decorated with twinkling fairy lights and colorful balloons, creating a cozy yet festive atmosphere. Emily sat at the center of it all, her face glowing with excitement as she clapped her hands to the sound of soft music playing in the background. Sarah arrived with Jake, who immediately ran over to join Emily at the table laden with snacks and treats. As they enjoyed the food and laughter, Thomas stood up, clearing his throat to get everyone's attention. "I just wanted to say a few words," he began, his voice warm but tinged with nervousness. "Tonight is special because it marks 6 months since Sarah became part of our lives. And honestly, I don't think I can put into words how much that has meant, not just to me, but to Emily and our entire family." Sarah smiled shyly, brushing off the praise. "It's been a team effort," she said, glancing at Emily, who grinned widely. Thomas shook his head, smiling softly. "No, Sarah, it's more than that. You've done something extraordinary. You've reminded me what truly matters. You've taught me how to be a better father, a better person. And tonight, I want to do something to show my gratitude." He paused, reaching into his pocket and pulling out an envelope. Handing it to Sarah, he added, "This isn't about work or obligation. This is about saying thank you for everything." Sarah hesitated, looking at the envelope curiously. Slowly, she opened it and gasped as she pulled out a document inside. Her eyes widened as she realized what it was: a trust fund set up in Jake's name, fully funded to cover his education and future expenses. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at Thomas, speechless. "I know how hard you've worked to provide for him," Thomas continued, his voice steady but emotional. "And I want to help lighten that burden. Jake deserves every opportunity to succeed, just like Emily does. Consider this my way of giving back to both of you." Jake, overhearing the commotion, came over to see what was happening. When Sarah explained what Thomas had done, the boy's face lit up with disbelief and joy. "For me?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Really?" Thomas knelt down to meet Jake's gaze. "Yes, really. You're an amazing kid, Jake, just like your mom." Sarah couldn't hold back the tears any longer. She hugged Jake tightly before turning to Thomas, her voice breaking. "I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't feel like enough." "You don't have to say anything," Thomas replied gently. "Just knowing you're happy is enough for me." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of the gesture sinking in. Then Emily broke the quiet by shouting, "Group hug." Everyone laughed as they gathered around, arms wrapped tightly around each other. That night marked a new beginning for all of them. Thomas had finally found balance between his responsibilities as a father and his role as a provider. Sarah had gained not only financial security, but also a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. And for Emily and Jake, 2 children from vastly different worlds, the bond they shared grew stronger with each passing day. As the stars twinkled above the estate, Thomas reflected on how far they'd come. He had entered this journey seeking a caregiver for his daughter, but along the way, he had gained so much more: a second chance at fatherhood, a friend who changed his perspective, and a blended family unlike any he could have imagined. Life wasn't perfect, it never would be. But for the first time in years, Thomas felt at peace. Together, they had built something beautiful, something real. And as they stood under the autumn sky, laughing and sharing stories, it was clear that their unconventional family was exactly where they were meant to be. The cafe had grown quieter as the night deepened, the hum of conversation replaced by the gentle clinking of cups and saucers. Sarah sat across from Thomas, her mind racing as she processed everything he'd shared. His honesty about his shortcomings as a father surprised her. She hadn't expected someone like him to admit such vulnerability. Yet there was something undeniably genuine in his words, a rawness that made her believe he truly wanted to change. Thomas leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. He hesitated for a moment before speaking again, choosing his words carefully. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion, "I need your help." Sarah blinked, caught off guard. "My help? With what?" He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "You saw how much Emily connected with you tonight. The way she lit up when you were helping her. It's something I've never been able to give her. Not because I don't care, but because, well, I don't know how. I'm not good at this. At being the kind of father she needs." He paused, looking directly into her eyes. "I want to hire you, to be her caregiver, full-time." Sarah's jaw dropped slightly, her mind struggling to process what he was saying. "Wait, what?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You want me to work for you?" "Yes," Thomas said firmly, leaning forward again. "But it wouldn't just be a job. It would be more than that. You'd have complete flexibility. Whatever hours you need, however you want to structure it. And I'll make sure you're compensated fairly. Very fairly." Sarah shook her head, her brow furrowing. "That's a lot to take in. I mean, I already have a job. And Jake, I can't just drop everything." "I understand," Thomas replied quickly, holding up a hand. "And I wouldn't ask you to. That's why I'm offering benefits, not just for you, but for your son too. Health insurance, education funds, anything you need. I want to make this work for both of you." Sarah stared at him, her heart pounding. The offer was tempting, more than tempting. The idea of financial stability, of being able to provide for Jake without constantly worrying about bills or juggling shifts, was almost overwhelming. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. Was this too good to be true? Could she really trust him? "Why me?" she asked finally, her voice soft but probing. "There are plenty of professionals out there who could do this better than I can. People with training, experience." Thomas cut her off gently. "Because you're different, Sarah. You care. You connect. You don't just see Emily as a responsibility. You see her as a person. That's something money can't buy. And honestly, I think you could teach me a thing or two about being a better father." His words hit her like a wave, washing away some of her doubts. She thought about Emily, the bright smile, the laughter, the way she had looked at Sarah with such trust. If she could make even a small difference in that little girl's life, wasn't it worth considering? Still, she hesitated. "This is a huge decision," she said slowly. "I'd need time to think about it. To talk to Jake, figure out what's best for us." Thomas nodded, understanding completely. "Of course. Take all the time you need. But please, just promise me one thing. Don't say no right away. Give it a chance." Sarah smiled faintly, touched by his sincerity. For the first time, she allowed herself to entertain the possibility. Maybe this could work. Maybe it could be a fresh start, not just for Emily and Thomas, but for her and Jake too. As they left the cafe together, Sarah felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension bubbling inside her. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. This unexpected encounter had planted a seed of hope in her heart, a hope that things might finally begin to change for the better. Sarah's decision to accept Thomas's offer came after days of careful thought, sleepless nights, and heartfelt conversations with Jake. At first, her son was hesitant. He didn't like the idea of his mom working for someone else, especially someone as intimidating as a billionaire. But when Sarah explained how it could mean stability for them, better opportunities for him, and a chance to help a little girl who needed kindness, Jake softened. "If it makes you happy, Mom," he said with a small smile, "then I'm okay with it." And so, Sarah stepped into a new chapter of her life, one that would change everything. From the moment she began working with Emily, it was clear she had made the right choice. Every morning, Sarah arrived at the Harrington estate, greeted by Emily's joyful squeals as she ran, or rather wobbled, toward her with arms outstretched. Sarah quickly became more than just a caregiver. She was a friend, a mentor, and a source of unwavering support. She taught Emily new skills, celebrated her victories, no matter how small, and encouraged her to believe in herself. Thomas watched from afar, marveling at the transformation. For years, he had struggled to connect with Emily, unsure of how to bridge the gap between them. But now he saw glimpses of a relationship he'd always longed for, a bond built on laughter, trust, and shared moments. Under Sarah's guidance, he slowly began to step into his role as a father. He learned how to feed Emily without making her feel self-conscious, how to play games that accommodated her abilities, and how to simply be present. It wasn't easy, but Sarah's patience and example gave him the confidence to try. Their dynamic evolved naturally over time. What started as an employer-employee relationship blossomed into something deeper, an unconventional yet deeply supportive family unit. Sarah brought warmth and stability to their home, filling it with the kind of love and laughter it had been missing for years. In return, Thomas ensured she had everything she needed: flexible hours to spend time with Jake, access to resources for his education, and even opportunities to pursue her dream of returning to teaching someday. Jake, too, became part of their world. On weekends, he often joined Sarah at the estate, where he and Emily formed an instant friendship. They played board games, painted pictures together, and giggled uncontrollably during movie nights. Watching them interact filled Thomas with a sense of gratitude he hadn't known before. He realized that Sarah wasn't just helping Emily grow. She was healing wounds he hadn't even acknowledged existed. One evening, as Sarah tucked Emily into bed, the little girl looked up at her with wide eyes. "Do you think Daddy loves me?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Sarah smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face. "Of course he does, sweetheart. More than anything." "But he's always busy," Emily murmured, her lower lip trembling slightly. "He's learning," Sarah reassured her, "and he's trying really hard. Sometimes people need a little help to figure things out. That doesn't mean they don't care. It means they're growing." Emily nodded, seemingly comforted by Sarah's words. As Sarah turned off the light and closed the door behind her, she found Thomas standing in the hallway, his expression thoughtful. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything." Sarah smiled, shaking her head. "You're doing great, Thomas. Better than you realize." The months passed, and their lives intertwined in ways none of them could have predicted. Through Sarah's influence, Thomas rediscovered the joy of being a father, while Sarah found purpose and security she hadn't felt in years. Together, they created a home filled with love, resilience, and hope, a testament to the power of kindness and second chances. But just when they thought life couldn't get any better, Thomas had one final surprise planned, a gesture so unexpected that it would leave Sarah speechless and forever grateful. After settling the bill, Thomas hesitated for a moment, his gaze lingering on Sarah as she cleared a nearby table. The restaurant was beginning to wind down, the dinner rush fading into a quieter hum of conversation and clinking dishes. He knew he should leave. After all, Emily was growing tired, and it was getting late, but something stopped him. This woman had unknowingly stirred something deep within him, and he couldn't walk away without at least trying to understand her better. Summoning his courage, Thomas approached Sarah as she stacked plates onto a tray. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but firm. She turned to face him, slightly surprised by the interruption. "I just wanted to thank you again for everything you did tonight. You didn't have to help my daughter like that, but you did. And it meant, well, it meant a lot." Sarah blinked, taken aback by the sincerity in his tone. Most customers barely acknowledged her beyond placing their orders, let alone expressing gratitude so openly. "Oh, it's really no problem," she replied quickly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm just doing my job." Thomas shook his head. "No, it wasn't just your job. What you did, it came from somewhere else. From who you are." He paused, searching for the right words. "Look, I don't want to keep you from your work, but would it be okay if we talked? Just for a few minutes, after your shift ends." Sarah frowned, unsure of what to make of this request. The man standing before her was clearly wealthy. His tailored suit and expensive watch were hard to miss. But there was something about him that felt different, vulnerable, even. Still, she hesitated. Strangers didn't usually ask to talk after hours, especially not men like him. Was this some kind of trick? A setup? "I'm not sure," she said cautiously, glancing toward the kitchen where her manager was chatting with another server. "I mean, I've got responsibilities and I don't know." Thomas held up a hand, sensing her reluctance. "I completely understand if you say no. I wouldn't blame you for being cautious. I would be too. But I promise, I only want to talk. No strings attached. You helped my daughter tonight, and I'd like to repay that kindness somehow, even if it's just by hearing your story." His honesty struck a chord with Sarah. There was no arrogance in his voice, no sense of entitlement, just genuine curiosity and appreciation. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she said softly, "but nothing funny, all right? Just talking." "Of course," Thomas assured her. "Thank you." As Sarah returned to her duties, Thomas stepped outside to wait, giving her space to finish her shift. Leaning against the sleek frame of his luxury car, he replayed the evening in his mind. The way Sarah had effortlessly connected with Emily, the ease with which she'd handled a situation that often left others flustered. It wasn't just her actions that intrigued him. It was the person behind them. Who was she? How had she become someone capable of such grace under pressure? When Sarah finally emerged from the restaurant nearly an hour later, she looked tired but composed. Her uniform was replaced with a simple sweater and jeans, and her hair was tied back in a loose bun. Seeing Thomas still waiting, she gave him a small, uncertain smile. "Ready?" she asked. He straightened up, gesturing toward a nearby cafe across the street. "There's a place over there where we can grab coffee. My treat, of course." Sarah raised an eyebrow, amused despite herself. "You're persistent, aren't you?" Thomas chuckled, the sound lighter than usual. "Let's just say I don't give up easily when something matters to me." The two crossed the street together, their steps slow and measured. As they entered the cozy cafe, Sarah found herself wondering what exactly this billionaire saw in her. A waitress working double shifts to make ends meet. Little did she know, their conversation was about to change both their lives in ways neither of them could have anticipated. The cafe was warm and inviting, its soft lighting casting a golden glow over the small tables scattered around the room. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of baked goods. Thomas gestured for Sarah to take a seat by the window, where they could watch the quiet evening traffic pass by outside. As she settled into her chair, he headed to the counter to order their drinks. 2 steaming cups of coffee, one black for him and one with cream and sugar for her. When he returned, Sarah wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. She glanced at him cautiously, still unsure of why she had agreed to this meeting. "So," she began, breaking the silence, "what exactly do you want to talk about?" Thomas took a sip of his coffee before setting it down carefully. He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on the table. "I guess I just wanted to know more about you," he admitted. "You seem different, not like most people I meet." Sarah raised an eyebrow, amused but skeptical. "Different how?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "You're kind. Genuine. Most people would have ignored my daughter tonight, or maybe helped out of obligation. But you didn't. You did it because it's who you are. That's rare." Sarah looked down at her cup, her cheeks flushing slightly at the compliment. "It's not that big a deal," she murmured. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Thomas said firmly, shaking his head. "Not everyone. Trust me, I've seen enough of the world to know that kindness like yours isn't common. And it made me wonder, what drives someone like you? What's your story?" For a moment, Sarah stayed silent, weighing whether or not to open up to this stranger. But there was something disarming about Thomas's honesty, something that made her feel safe despite her initial reservations. Finally, she sighed and began to speak. "I'm a single mom," she started, her voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. "My son, Jake, is 6. We've been on our own since he was 2. His dad left when I found out I was pregnant, so it's just been me trying to keep things together ever since." She paused, taking a sip of her coffee before continuing. "I used to be a teacher, elementary school, but when the district cut funding, I lost my job. Now I work here because it pays the bills, even if it's not what I dreamed of doing." Thomas listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "That must be hard," he said softly. "Raising the kid alone while working long hours. I can't imagine." "It's not easy," Sarah admitted, her tone matter-of-fact. "But I do it for Jake. He's smart, curious, full of energy. I want him to have opportunities I never did, to go to college, to chase his dreams without worrying about money like I always have." Her eyes softened as she spoke about her son, the love in her voice unmistakable. Thomas nodded, feeling a pang of admiration and guilt. Here was someone fighting tooth and nail to give her child a better life, while he, with all his resources, had neglected his own daughter for years. "You're amazing," he said quietly. "Most people would crumble under that kind of pressure, but you just keep going." Sarah shrugged, brushing off the praise. "It's not about being amazing. It's survival. You do what you have to for the people you love." Her words struck a chord with Thomas, reminding him of everything he'd been missing. "That's what I admire about you," he said earnestly. "Your strength, your selflessness. I wish," he trailed off, his voice thick with emotion, "I wish I could say I've been half the parent you are." Sarah tilted her head, studying him curiously. "Why do you say that?" Thomas sighed, running a hand through his neatly styled hair. For the first time, he let his guard down completely. "Because I haven't been there for Emily, not really. I spent my whole life building this empire, thinking I was giving her the best life possible. But tonight, watching you with her, I realized I've been failing her in ways I didn't even see until now." The vulnerability in his voice caught Sarah off guard. She hadn't expected this polished billionaire to bare his soul so openly. Yet, as she sat across from him, she saw not just a man of wealth and power, but a father struggling to make sense of his mistakes. And in that moment, she understood that their lives, though vastly different, shared a common thread: the desire to give their children a brighter future. Neither of them knew it yet, but this conversation would set the stage for something neither could have predicted: a partnership built on trust, gratitude, and the hope of second chances.